Alright, sorry about that, guys. As people join me again, you know, I never fails, I go over an hour. My apologies. But don't worry, anything that you missed will be on in my YouTube channel, which will have a link in my profile. And I will include this for the next 24 hours because that's the limit of Instagram in my story. So not to worry, you can catch us anytime. Hi again, Erin. Thank you so much for joining me again. Sorry about that. It's that timer again. Alrighty, so we'll just get back into this. And I'm going back in with some of the black here. Just as I mentioned, I like to do that whenever I'm coming back in to bring in some more texture. So you'll see me do it just a little bit in here. Not in a lot of places. I'm not trying to get full hairs. I'm just trying to get some marks in. Sorry, my tablet timed out there. Just some random ones. It also cools off the edge to give it more shadow. And I'm going to get just a little bit deeper of a mark here with the deeper black. So I'm going to get that rubbed in. There. I like that contrast. Something else with the eyelid here, I'm going to use two pencils to show this. So this eyelid here comes this way, the third eyelid goes into it, so they tuck into each other like this. So I hope that makes sense. So you got to watch out and pay attention to that too. I'm going to get just a little bit more black in here with the iris. So I really want it to be rich. Here we go. Another way to make something look extremely bright versus dark is to do you know, a light versus dark with the edge itself. So if I do just a very, 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 very fine line here around the black, it will make it stand out more. Alright, now then, moving on. So just coming in to accentuate some of the darker hairs. Not too much. I don't want it to be too drastic. It's just to get some of the forms going. There is some actual black fur right through here, so I'm going to start working that in too. And if you remember, I did some browns through here. It may not be as visible on the camera, but it keeps the black warm and without it being too flat. Well, I don't like how my pencil's doing right now because that one is just so dull. And this is actually pretty rich black through this section. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring this little guy in. Unfortunately, I have to have it at a fairly sharp angle. So you may not be able to see my marks too terribly well right now, but that's just because of the way I have a point on it. This cat has a really dark little line of fur right through here. There we go. Go ahead and get some of these marks in. I'm going to come back with a dark gray to actually lighten it in a bit. I'm just keeping the fur texture going with the angle of the cheek. You can probably see this comes down a little bit more downwards, and this one actually goes up. So they meet and create a really dark patch. Right over here. Go ahead and start working that in. Good old spots. I don't know why I always love drawing leopards and tigers, because I gotta tell you, when it comes to doing spots and stripes, it is a pain. It really is. Trying to manage their shape, trying to make sure you're getting them dark enough, getting the fur around it, because they're not just, you know, different colors. Sometimes in some animals they actually stand out more. Hi Jessica, thank you for joining me. And if you missed any part of the first portion of this where I just did the eye, it'll be in my story for the next 24 hours and will also be found in my YouTube channel, which is it's still a pretty new YouTube channel. I have a oil painting from start to finish in there that's sped up, and I've also got I have two oil paintings, one of a cat, one of a 100-year-old painting. One of them, the 100-year-old painting, I'm reproducing for a client. By the way, it is out of copyright, so no worries. That one that one's live speed, live time, and then the other one of the cat is all sped up. So it's not, you know, take as long as the other one. Sorry, apparently I can't seem to talk today while drawing. Forgive me. All right, so this is a lot of dark area here. I'm going to come back in with this is actually a fairly cool dark gray. And Erin says, how do you price your, it says Cummings, but like the author, but I'm assuming you mean commissions, because I really want to be able to make a living with my art at some point in the future. You know what, that's a great question, and frankly it depends on the artist and how much they feel comfortable with asking, because you know what, that is the hardest thing for a lot of artists to determine for themselves. My pricing just comes from experience on what sells, and because I only do this part-time, so I'm not looking to drive huge sales. But for my oils, I typically do it about $5 per square inch for me. And then if it's a technically very detailed background, I'll usually tack on a little bit more, like a 20% or so, because it's more paint, more work. If it's a pastel, I usually do $2 per square inch, because that's reasonable given the amount of work that goes into it. When it's my colored pencils, which I sometimes mix with watercolors as well, I only do it for about $1.50. So that all adds up when you're talking about the size, but that's just what I have found sells. Now, when I started out initially, of course, I did not charge nearly that amount. But thankfully, since I'm carried by a gallery, and they actually are a fantastic resource. The Dutch Art Gallery, by the way, for anyone interested. I love those guys. Pam Master is the owner there, and she's amazing. She takes care of her artists. Anyway, they support, and they also help get your name out there. Doing competitions helps get your name out there. So the more you're known, the more people, share your name and your artwork word of mouth, the more that your art can be valued at a higher rate, just like with any brand name. So when I first started out, I was very inexpensive. I really just did an amount that I felt like would sell. And the thing is, though, sometimes people are funny. They have a tendency of thinking that a higher dollar amount makes higher value, which is why we buy Starbucks sometimes instead of going to the store and making our own, not only for the ease, but also because it's a name brand. Everybody does Starbucks, right? Well, I don't, but I'm not I'm not a drinker of coffee. But sometimes the more you value your paintings as far as how much you charge, quite frankly, the more people may be interested in it because they perceive it as a value. Also, more competitions that you win, your name gets out there more. So it's always good to start applying to those errands. So that's a very good question. No two prices are the same. I charge more for oils than I do for pencil or pastels because they take longer, require more expensive materials, and I usually give a lot more for them. Whenever I do them, I not only do the painting itself, I do a certificate of authenticity, which is extremely helpful to prove the value of the painting later on in life, but also helps prove that who the artist was. I include oftentimes a GIF or GIF or however you want to pronounce it. I know that's always a big war of how to pronounce that, but I do an animated GIF, however you want to say it, or a video sped up of the process, because a lot of people love to see their paintings actually come together, and that can be a definite selling point. I encourage you to do that. Remember what I've said to you here about in the past, lighter color on top of darker color. You want to turn your pencil frequently, or you pick up too much of the prior color on your pencil tip. Okay, anyway, back to what I was saying. I include the certificate of authenticity. I often do video as a freebie, and I've started now also offering with my oil paintings the high quality picture where we can have prints made. So family or friends, like if it's a person versus a pet or whatever somebody wants, they can actually share that with other family members to have their own less expensive print. So that helps. And then I also give them a guarantee for life too on any repair work that's minor and revarnishing, because you can take varnish off of an oil painting and reapply it if something happens to it. like smoke. You know, hopefully nobody ever has a fire, but if it happens, it's how I can repair smoke damage. If it, you know, gets scratched or something, that's an easy repair. That's the joy of oil painting, is it's easy to take the varnish off, easy to do repairs. You can always paint on top, you know, etc. I hope that answered your question. But for right now, as far as whenever you're first starting out, you know, don't expect a huge audience immediately. It takes time to build that up. And don't let that get you down. Not everybody has the same appreciation for art in some areas than others. Like, you know, in Texas, art is more readily accepted in Austin than it is in Dallas, although Dallas also has its own art area. But, you know, you have to think about the areas that you might get more buyers. Like if you're into animal art, checking in with vets to see if they're willing to let you to carry an ad for you there on their window or something, or even places that do cremations for pets, because people, when they're grieving, you know, they want to have something that's an eternal reminder of the little one that they loved, and they're not going to be thinking clearly, and they may not think about something like a portrait, like, you know, thinking that is something that's actually within their grasp. I've come across that a lot where you know, they stumble across something of mine or a friend of mine's, and they're like, you know, I never even thought about being able to do this or be able to afford it. So, you know, putting that in places where they can find it. I never suggest preying on somebody's needs at the time. I always give people plenty of time, patience. I just want to help them have a memento forever of the little one that they loved. But, you know, oh, don't worry about that, Aaron. Aaron said just he didn't realize he spelled it wrong. I figured you meant commissions. Don't worry about it. I had a feeling it wasn't about the author, E.E. Cummings. But anyway, so yeah, be aware not only of how much you're charging, but the area that you're charging. If it's an area that does not get a lot of traffic, then sometimes it's better to charge less and get more traffic than it is to charge more and have somebody go to your neighbor. But it's a very fine line to walk. I hope that helped. I hope that answered your question right, Aaron. Thank you so much. I always enjoy your questions. Alright, see, it's moving along fairly quickly. Coming in with a, oops, wrong one. Hold on, let me find where I was. My color I was looking for. Where did you go? Alright. You know what? I'm going to brighten up this area right here just a bit, because there's just a really, really, really bright light right here. Just in this one spot. There we go. And right over here too. I actually need to darken up this section right there because there's a shadow that drops. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real fast. I'm going to use my really dark hard pastel. And keeping in mind that the eyelid also has a structure to it. It's darker, you know, just like with our own eyelid, how you have that lip up here at the top, this guy has that too. So it's going to be darker on the lower part, darker on the upper part, and the middle part that actually is rounded closer towards you is brighter. So I'm just keeping that in mind as I put in these marks. Not to mention the curve, just like with here from dark, light, dark, we also get dark, light, dark. I hope that made sense. So I'm trying to get some of those lines marked in. Using the hard pastel, it does a really good job of taking in the paper, going into the grit really well, and being nice and dark with minimal pressure. There we are. Alright, so it's coming together. Let's see, penciled imagination is asked, when painting animals, is there an area you always start first? With mine, I always do the eyes first. You know, it's funny you say that. Me too. I love the eye. It's my favorite area to work on. That's the heart and soul of a painting, because that's, as humans, we look at each other in the eye when we talk. Our pets watch our eyes to see what we are looking at or what we're interested in. I mean, eye contact is everything, so that's the most important part. And let's face it, if it's our favorite part to draw, the best way to keep yourself interested in the work is to start with the eyes. And like you, oh gosh, yes, I love the eyes. In fact, the portrait side of my business, I actually call it Bright Eyes Portraits. So yeah, if you ever want to contact me by email to ask questions, or you can do it through Instagram, DMing, or you can do it through my email, which is Bright Eyes Portraits with an S at the end at Gmail. So that's my business one that I use for anything art related. All right, as I had mentioned earlier about this track of fur that is darkest here, because that's where the eye actually often drains. When it gets teary. You'll see that, excuse me, in your own pet. If you're not quite sure, you don't have a pet of your own, if you look up poodles especially, you'll see that pretty dramatically with poodles. They all have a dark area right here. For this cat is actually dark fur right in this section, and then just some of the eye drain here. So gross, I know, but it is what it is. And remember to pay attention to the direction of your fur at all times. It goes all kinds of crazy directions. So especially in the face, especially around where forms like the nose, the eye, and the cheek meet, they just really change direction very quickly. And for those just joining me, I know I've said this to those that have been here already, but bear with me. I am posting this to my story as well, so you will be able to catch up on anything that you missed. And it will be, although unfortunately the story is only a 24-hour thing, but I am posting it on YouTube as well. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I love questions. Now, this section here actually has a lot of shadow because of the dappled light. So to get that effect without using white, I use blue. There's two shades of blue I really love for this. This is one of them. I hope you guys can see this okay. And this is the other. This is more of a sky blue. This is more of a cerulean blue, if you're familiar with cerulean. I love cerulean for this. So we've got a little bit of a shadow just specifically through this section. I'm just going to turn the pencil as I go. You'll see it's not just overt with the color, but it does warm up those black hairs right here. This will give the sense of there being more, for lack of a better word, body to the drawing, instead of just being a flat black and white. Because, you know, leopard fur is deceptive. There's actually a lot of color going on with it. A lot of color. I've got everything from purples to yellows, blues, oranges, browns. It's surprising. Alright, and this is the sky blue here. So I'm bringing in some of the lighter areas because though there's shadow here, there's a lot of bright light here, and that's because this section is raised. This section is actually got cast shadow, and that's because the cheekbone is raised. So you've got the light going up and over and up. Hope that makes sense. It helps to think about the anatomy of the animal you're drawing. It'll help you watch out for what to do with your colors and your line work. Just always think of it as a 3D form as best as you can. And Erin asks, do you draw people portraits? Why, yes, I do. I love doing people portraits. Actually, that's how I started out with my art career and with my schooling. Was I did a lot of portraiture as well as figurative art. And figurative art's very popular in school because it's a lot easier to get a person to sit still than it is an animal. But actually, you'll see my own self-portrait in my gallery if you want to check that out sometime. And that one I had a lot of fun with. It was actually for the gallery itself that carries my work. They were doing a fun little deal where they would have certain artists paint themselves, and then they would hang our artwork around it. So I really enjoyed that one immensely. I used a method called Verdaccio, which I sometimes will use in my pet work as well, or my animal art as well. Verdaccio, and forgive my dog Serafina, she's barking again. The only way I can get her to stop right now is if I yell, because she gets really carried away sometimes. Anyway, Verdaccio is an Italian word for, basically, if you've ever seen Terra Verde, it's a green. You start off with green. you literally do your lights and darks all in green. And I do put up the steps of how I did that in my, here she goes again, how I did that in my own portrait. And then you come over it with flesh tones, your reds, your pinks, your oranges, and holy cow, the color is 3 times more intense and more realistic. And that's quite frankly the way that, you know, the human skin is. Sorry, it's my husband blowing a little trumpet to stop my dogs from barking. Oh, it never fails to make me laugh. It sounds so silly. It's a party horn that I brought home from work one day, and the dogs love it, so we sometimes use it to lure them back in the house. Oh, mercy me. Anyway. Hi, Franco. Thanks for joining us. But anyway, to Erin, yeah, I love doing people portraits. It's a lot of fun. Plus, one of my favorite things to do is learn about clients, whether it be their animal, pet, whether it be a person. I love learning about them, and you learn a lot whenever you're working on a portrait. They become part of your own family, your own group. And not every portrait to me, whether it be animal, people, all of them are I think, very special. And I try to treat them all as that. I don't like to think of them as being just another, you know, client-business relationship. I really enjoy it. And whenever you start getting more heavily into it, Erin, I think you'll really enjoy it too. It's a lot of fun. It's amazing some of the people that you meet. And 6 Sky Blues, I hope I said that right. Hi, thanks for joining. Okay, so for those that have already seen some of this, there's an area here that's kind of recessed, and that's because the eye has a curve to it here. So for some of the blue, or some of the white fur, I'm actually coming in with a blue. And that's to maintain that shadow look, because this cat is in dappled light. And feel free to ask any questions for anyone who's watching right now. And, oh, by the way, you might hear my aquarium in the background. I have a 65-gallon tank next to me, within like 3 feet, which is why you can hear it so well. This is a lighter blue. I'm just doing this one for some lighter hairs along the edges of where this curves. For this area, I'm just keeping a shorter hair because it helps bring in the texture. There's actually a black mark here I'm about to go and bring in before I get too far. There we go. Let's see. Erin says, have you heard of an artist called The Art of Aaron Blaise? He used to work for Disney. No. I will definitely check that one out too. You've had a couple of good suggestions. I'm looking forward to checking that out. I'm sure he'll be, especially if he worked for Disney. I am a nut for Disney. Are. And you know, when you're starting out too, part of your earlier question, Erin, sometimes when you're starting out, if you idolize a artist's style, like you know, if you're into Aaron's work that you just mentioned, Aaron Blaise, it can help sometimes to recreate some of their work for the sake of getting familiar with how they do their style. When you start learning other people's styles, sometimes it helps you really develop your own style as well. And let's see, Penciled Imagination says, I'm glad that you showed that you use colors you wouldn't normally think of in areas, slight blues and shadows. I think it really increases the depth, and it's something I just learned how to do. Oh, it's a ton of fun, especially whenever you come across colors that you would never, you know, think are there. I use a lot of purples, for instance. Like whenever I get to a dark area, let me show you right now. So when I'm working on a dark area like this, like a spot or a shadow that's really dark, sometimes, and this is my favorite on tigers especially, if you come in with a warm color right with it, right just at the edges, nowhere else, just right at the edges, it'll actually make them stand out more. And you can do a little bit of blue in a couple places inside of it. Instead of using a white to do the hairs through it, use a blue. Actually, wrong color blue there, hold on. I have all my pencils next to me, like this, and to do your line work marks, and that'll actually make it stand out a lot. I'll actually take a picture of this later so you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. And just come back to my feed, or I always forget what to call it. I guess portfolio. I don't know. Instagram. We'll just say Instagram, and you'll see it. But it does make it stand out a bit more, and that's because of the way our eyes work and the color frequencies. It's really fascinating stuff. I'm using this blue around the edge of the iris as well. Here we are. But blue in shadowed areas, that's your best bet. In fact, when it comes to oil painting, whenever I'm mixing a black, I use 3 main colors. I'm going to use pencil representations of that actually real quick here. So let me grab them really quick. Where's the other one? Here we are. So these are the 3 colors I tend to use. These may come out a little brighter in the picture than they are in real life. They're actually quite dark. This one would be alizarin crimson in oil. This one would be burnt umber in oil, and French ultramarine. These 3 colors together make the richest black I've ever seen. I love it. Strongly suggest that if you ever try out oil. It also works with pencils and things too. And speaking of which, crazy colors. I was talking about Verdaccio a little bit ago when it comes to doing portrait work. And you can actually do that with animal art as well, where you start off with some greens underneath. Or another color would work as well. But what you're looking for is, if you were to look at a color wheel, it would be on the opposite side of the primary color that you're going to be working in. Let's say it's, I have to think of the color wheel real quick, hold on. See, so let's say you're doing green. You've got your, you know how you have your yellow, blue, and red. So green would be right here between the yellow and the blue, because those 2 make green. Red is opposite, so red would work well underneath the green. Just to give you, for instance, they would make each other, they work against each other really well, and would make each other pop in color. So if you're vice versa, if you're working in red, then do green underneath. Skin tones tend to be a little bit more on the red side than you might expect. Let me go ahead and start working in this dark area here before I get too far ahead of myself. I'm not just scribbling it in, I'm also getting in the shapes of the hair itself. Erin says, I do copy artists when I'm trying to learn how to draw something. That's perfect. That's fantastic. I did that too. In fact, in school, that's what they taught us to do. I went to college at Stephen F. Austin for a fine arts degree ages and ages ago. Graduated in 2005, actually. But they would have us all the time do redrawing of the old masters. Michelangelo, you know, you get the idea. All the classics everybody knows. Okay, so you saw that I did my line work scribbles here on the outer part, and then here on the inside I'm just going to scribble it in a bit heavier. Okay, anyway, but by doing that, it really helped us learn and build a style and better understand their process. And by doing that, it helps you improve your own process too. It's very, very handy. I strongly encourage it. Alright, so this is a warm gray. It's not too bright, which is what I want right now, because this area is actually pretty dark. I'm trying to, again, keep in mind, I'm just doing some guide marks really fast, very light, to help me keep in mind the direction of the fur, because this really does some weird stuff over here with this fur. Just some dotted lines. Alright, doing these guidelines before I start really working into the fur will prevent my making an error. And that's why I work so softly to begin with and just build it up. You may or may not be able to see this. There's actually some brown here that was a rich reddish brown, and you'll see how that starts warming up this section compared to this section. So doing that previously helped me out when I got to the actual area. Thanks for all the great questions, guys. I really appreciate it. Loving it. But you can see how fast this came together. I mean, we haven't been working that long on this. By the way, the reason I wear the gloves twofold. One is, you can see how messy it gets. And 2 is because it'll help me prevent from getting oils on the surface of the paper itself, because oil will attract dust. And you'll get patches of color you can't get rid of if you're not careful. So That's one of the things about graphite, charcoal, anything that has any kind of a dust whatsoever, you're going to find that frequently happens. So keep your skin oil off of it. Won't be a problem. Not too bad. I think it's come together. What do you think? There we are. And there's a few lighter hairs through this section. Funny thing with the nose is this brow actually is kind of bulbous, comes out here. This one, you can kind of see it on this side, is a bit bulbous. I don't know if you can see it through text, but you'll see it in the picture I've got added through my gallery. Anyway, so I'm trying to keep that, not only the light and dark tones, but also the fur direction helps develop that appearance. So I'm going to go ahead and get some more guide marks here. You may or may not be able to see them very well. I can though. It's kind of goofy how it does. Just all over the place. I mean, it's got a definitive pattern to it, but it's just not where you would expect it to go. And that's why you do the guidelines. Let's see. Penciled Imagination says it's looking amazing. The eyes are exquisite. Why, thank you. It makes my night. I really appreciate that. This is, you know, like you, it's my favorite thing to work on. And let's see. I'm trying to bring some of this down. Keep in mind this is a warm but darker gray tone. And that's because there's actually a lot of black mark down in this section. So right just at the edge of where this white is, I want to keep it warm before it goes really dark, because it'll help blend everything together as I move into the darker shapes. And it helps to carry some of these colors over in different sections too. It'll keep everything working together and like it belongs together, not like it's patches of something. You don't always have to do actual fur marks so much as sometimes you can just do a little bit of a scribble. If it's a lot of area that's got a lot of really small fine hairs, it's better sometimes just to do that little, like right here, just do a little scribble. The texture of the paper will work for you, because if you get too much mark between, then it just looks weird. Hope that makes sense. Here we go. I'm just very carefully adding some additional hairs right in the black section. Okay, so right along that edge of the black, there is a very warm fur color, which I'm going to get added in. There it is. Sorry, I had to look for my pencil. So this is a golden ochre color. I'm going to come in just right at the edge here, where the black is, and start adding a little bit of that in. Nothing too dramatic, not all along the same area. I'm just doing it in patches, just like the real thing has. Just in a few places. Aaron says, I've noticed that you are a huge fan of pit bulls from one of your two of them, and I love pit bulls. Oh, I love pit bulls too. That drawing was for a very good friend who won a commission whenever I hit 1,000 followers, and that would be Morgan Adams Art. By the way, check out her stuff. She's phenomenal. I love her to pieces. And she has a pit bull that actually saved her life, like I think she said twice. She has some medical conditions, and the pit bull taught itself, his name's Patrick, actually taught himself how to be a helper dog. Isn't that crazy? They are such good dogs. I've had them too many a time. I've had quite a few dogs in my almost 40 years. I feel so old tonight. Anyway, they are amazing. Of course, unfortunately, there's plenty that wind up in the wrong hands, and dogs do emulate their owners a lot of time, and they have a very strict sense of hierarchy and rules. I know that sounds a little crazy, but that's just the way dogs are. I grew up around more dogs than people when I was really young. But so if they have a sense that there might be a dangerous situation and they feel like the owner may not have the capability of handling it, they actually step up and take over. That's when you get more of an aggressive dog type in a lot of cases, when it's behavioral versus genetic. And so that's when you tend to get a little bit more of an aggressive dog in certain situations. Like they may bark more at other dogs or other people that come to visit. That's because they feel like they need to take up that spot in the hierarchy as the protector. So when you maintain habits, like feedings, walkings, things like that, and you're the one that hands them things all the time, you're the one that handles situations, you walk people into the house and invite them in versus just letting them walk in front of you. You walk in front of them, and the dogs will actually respond to that very positively. So you have an aggressive dog type, you have to maintain things like that, and unfortunately not all owners do that. And then you get a dog that's a little bit overprotective. Sorry if I went on a little diatribe there. Despite my dogs barking during some of the filming, they're actually pretty well trained. But yeah, building that relationship where they feel confident that you're there to protect them and yourself, and they will actually respond to stimuli by looking to you to deal with it versus them trying to deal with it for you. Again, that's typically where you get the more aggressive dog type. But again, sorry I'm going off on a diatribe there. Just can't help myself. But yeah, I love quite a few breeds. Pit bulls are, oh gosh, I love their smiles. They have the best smile, don't they? There's few dogs that give you a smile like a pit bull. I don't mean because of the teeth. Their whole face smiles. How can you not love that? All right, and as I go along here, one of the joys of Pastel is that you can do the marks over themselves. You always want to go dark to light, though. Sometimes I go mid-tone to dark or mid-tone to light, just because I get excited about an area and I jump ahead. I do that all the time, unfortunately. But you can always come back and do marks on top, so you can get little flyaway hairs in places. It's really nice. I've really developed a love for pastels. I'm just coming in with a little bit brighter white in a couple areas with some flyaway hairs because of the way this cat's cheek does. I'm trying to maintain the bluer shade. I'm actually needing to go back in with a little bit more blue. I'm going to go with a darker blue just for a couple spots. That's because it won't stand out terribly much, but it will give it the appearance of blue. I've got that one spot just a hair too bright, but I'm not that worried. I'll just cover it with another color. We'll cool it. We'll warm it up with a little bit of brown. And that'll work with it nicely. See? Let's see. Penciled Imagination asks, so what is your favorite animal to paint, and what is your favorite piece you have done? Oh, gosh. That's a hard one. Oh, let me think. I have quite a few favorites. When I was a kid, it was horses. Always horses. Oh my word. They were everywhere. My poor mom. I was a crazy horse girl. I did ride all the time, but, you know, I'm in Texas. What do you expect? I grew up in the countryside. Wolves are always one of my favorites. I am an absolute nut for wolves. And tigers are my other favorite. So it's that color, I think. It's that strong face. I love tigers. As far as my favorite painting, currently I have two. They are in my Instagram gallery. One of them is a black and white lion. That one is my pride and joy. It's huge. It's 15 inches by 30. So just to give you an idea, the whole head of the lion is actually bigger than this entire drawing of 9 by 12. It's actually almost human size with the face itself. And I used a very small paintbrush for the entire thing, which is kind of crazy. Where is my paintbrush? If I can find it, I'll show you. I found it. When you see it, keep in mind that most of it was done with this paintbrush. See how small it is? This is a rigger liner, and when you do paint on opposite sides, exactly opposite sides, you get a very chiseled edge. Can you see that? Hopefully you can see that. And it maintains its chiseled edge for quite a while, so you get a finer line than you would with any other type of brush I have found. Any other type. Everything else will splay out as you work. Anyway, that one is done primarily with that brush, and oh man, I got really into all the details, and it was the biggest project that I had worked on, so it's got a special place in my heart. The other one you'll find in there as well is a wolf standing in water with water dripping from its muzzle, and that one is special to me because I did that for my mom. I had actually done another piece that sold to a client within 3 days of putting it up there at the gallery for a competition. And so he bought that one and one of my tigers that you'll see in my portfolio as well. Thank you, Tom. Anyway, but I repainted it solely for my mother, not for resale, because she told me later after the fact how much that she loved that painting and really wanted it, but didn't want to say anything to me because she didn't want me to lose out on a sale. And she's sweet. She's so thoughtful. So she was doing what I call work graduation, aka retirement, and I repainted it for her in time for her retirement. Spent her last day with her up there at her job, having a big old time with her, and I, without her knowledge, the rest of the office and myself gathered together and we surprised her with it in the conference room, and she cried. I loved it. So that one has a very special place in my heart, as well as the lion. Usually my favorite ones tend to come from emotional attachment as much as anything else, or something that I've learned something new from, because I remember whenever I come across a new technique or something, I remember it through the painting that I did. So that always has a special attachment for me. Hi, Christina. Thanks for joining me. And by the way, guys, any part of this, because I've started working on the eye here, and then I've started going out into the fur area. So any area that you want to watch, it's going to be in my story for the next 24 hours, and I will be uploading it to YouTube. So you can actually watch the eye from start to finish in real time. I know that's so exciting, real time. But this part came together in about an hour, mostly because I'm just doing a lot of talking about the process. But yeah, don't worry if you miss anything you want to see it. It's definitely still going to be available. Trying to get some of these spots in. I always like to get spots in as I get to them before I start doing the fur around them, because it's infinitely better to do the fur marks into the spot afterwards than it is to fight around the fur marks afterwards. I hope that made sense. I'm still, even though I'm kind of scribbling them in, the black marks are still in the direction that the fur itself goes. Let me zoom out a little bit here. Occasionally I go back in and just darken certain areas. It's always good to step back a little bit from your work so you can see where you're at. And this cat has kind of a distinguished marking that goes through here a little bit. It's subtle, so I'm just kind of working it in a little bit at a time. And although it's kind of sacrifices some of my white marks, that is perfectly okay. At least it matches the line work on the real thing that way. Here we are. Oh, don't worry, penciled imagination. And she says, just for the others that won't be able to see this later, she says, or he, I'm sorry, I don't know which. I apologize, penciled. I need to learn how you did the eyes. Sure, absolutely. I walk you through the beginning process all the way to the end pretty thoroughly in the first part of the video. So that will be accessible. Actually, it probably is already, but stick with me for a little longer if you want to. Anyway, and I'm seeing some of the colors I have over here. I'm wanting to combine on the other eye too. So sometimes I do this where I go back in later and add a little bit more color to connect them. Because this has got light coming in through this section, so it's got to be really bright. Now that I've got fur color around here, it actually dulls the luminous quality of the eye, so I'm going back in to reshape certain colors. Because I want the sense of light coming through. One thing you'll notice, may be able to see it more Hi, Becca. Thank you for joining me. You may notice it more whenever you see the actual photograph that I'm going to post later. There's a really, really red here, a blue right next to it, black, and then yellow here. So that's because I'm using light refraction, knowledge on how light refraction works to build up the sense of color. And so if you think about how a prism breaks up a color, that's basically what I'm thinking about whenever I'm drawing this. But also, when you're talking about an eye, and I'll just readdress this now while we're all together, in case you have any questions. The eye itself, the cornea and the iris are actually flat. And, excuse my hand here, but it's flat. And then the lens curves over it. So if you can get the impression of the flat sense there and then the curve of the lens, which is usually how you use your highlights, then it really will stand out nicely. And let's see. Aaron says, as artists, we get really attached to our art. I totally agree, Aaron. I really do as well. Whenever I don't want to lose a piece, but I still want to sell it, one thing that I have started doing is taking a really quality picture of it, and then I can have a print made for myself to hang on my own wall. Just using those inexpensive services that are out there now. So if you don't want to lose a piece but you still want to make money, it's a great way to do it. Very cheap. The last one I did was, gosh, it was under $20. Go to Groupon and you'll see all kinds of options on how to do it cheaply. So strongly encourage that. Becca asks, is this pastels or colored pencils? It is pastels, and forgive me because my phone is at an angle, so I can't really see it very well, so it takes me a second to read. My apologies. But yeah, it is pastel. It's on a pastel matte paper, so it's a very fine tooth grit. I choose fine tooth because I do fur work and I don't want it eating up my pencil tips. My pencil tips last far longer with this than it ever would with the heavier grits like the mediums or extra large. Hi, studio. Thank you for joining us. And Aldebera. Sorry, I'm reading this at an angle, so it's hard for me to see. For those just joining me, not to worry. I actually started on the eye here, and we've worked on the fur all the way through here, through this video, and the other. I've got 2 videos going right now, actually, on it. Those will be posted in live time on my story, so you can still catch it. And that'll only last for 24 hours, though. So I also am going to be including it on my YouTube channel. So don't worry if you've missed something. It will be accessible. Okay, so this form here, it's a kind of more bulbous. So around it's going to be shadow. The very top area is going to be lighter. So I'm going to get the shadow worked in. I'm just going to use the black very lightly, keeping the direction of the fur. I've already got some marks in here to help me keep the direction. But so long as I keep that direction, it'll make more sense. If I were to do a line work, I can't even talk now, a line mark going opposite, then it would stand out and it would never cover up. So you always want to go the same direction with your line work. You can always cover up a color, but the line direction will kill you every time. I'm just very, very light. I can always come back later and darken it. So once you get it too dark, you get too much color in there, it fills in the grit, and then you can't do anything. So that's why it's a good idea here to just do a very, very, very light hand. I'm just doing very small marks. This is just a hard pastel. I use that when I get to my darks because it actually produces a lot denser color than the pencils do, because it doesn't have all that medium mixed in with it to get it to form the pencil lead and core. It just works out better. Excuse me, I've got a dog hair right here. That's the joy of dogs. And this part is pretty dark, so I'm going to start working it in a little heavier. I'm also going to come back in with some blue for this section to liven up the black. If you just do straight black, it looks flat. So when you come back in with other colors like blues, browns around it, it really strengthens and darkens it. And for those just joining in, feel free to ask any questions. So here's the blue. It's a pretty bright blue, almost the lapis lazuli, but in oils I'd probably call this a French ultramarine. I'm just putting in a couple of spots. I'm not going to do a whole lot with it because I just want it to be subtle and give it just a slight glow. Nothing too heavy-handed. It's just because I'm thinking of how light refracts, and you know, the way that when you've got picture prism, you've got your same direction every single time. It's consistent. Warms are on one side, cool colors on the other side. So you've got your yellows and your reds on one side, blues on the other. So shadows get blues, highlights get brighter colors. So shadows, if you catch the edge of a shadow and you warm it up, and right next to a cool color, like right here, I'm just going to use this very, very lightly, then it will give more of an impression of there being a curve there. I'm just very, very, very lightly. I'm just using a very small amount. And this is just to help build some warmth. If I were to just do straight white or straight gray, it would be a very boring image. It would not have the vitality that a living leopard's fur would have, because it's actually got quite a bit of color in it. It's just, you wouldn't expect it, but they're not just straight black and white. They have quite a bit of warm color on them. All right, where might I go? Coming in with a cooler gray here. It's pretty light. Oh, sorry. That was my alarm to remind me to do something. But anyway, just ignore it. Oh, there's some black marks here I forgot about. Let me get those in real quick. For those just joining me, whenever I need to sharpen this, forgive the dog fur. It's a plague in my house, no matter how much I vacuum. This is just a sanding block of foam, and I just turn it as I sharpen. This will also create dust, as you can probably see, and I can use that to my advantage as well later with a blending stump if I wanted to pick up some color. I'll show you actually. Let me just, I often use the, where'd it go? There it is. This is just a makeup brush, very soft. It used to be white, so you can see how much is in there. If I were to pick some of this up, I can actually go ahead and fill in some of the spots if I wanted to this way. Let me see where I'm at with my spots. So it's a good way to get color in pretty consistently in an area, especially if you want a much more controlled section. And you can see it actually lasts pretty far. So I can just pick up some more. I'm just looking really quick, see where my spots are, and just fill it in like that. I have pan pastels too, which I frequently use. However, sometimes if you don't have them handy and you've already got this available, why not, right? No point in wasting. And just like regular paint. Penciled Imagination says, in a future video, can you go over how you sharpen your pencils? I've given up on mechanical ones and now just use a blade and sandpaper. I also use a blade and sandpaper, but one of my dear friends, Catherine Martinez, you'll find her on here as kmartinez.art. I love that girl. She's one of my good friends. She works at the gallery that my artwork hangs at too. She got me this AFMAT, very inexpensive. This is only $17 or so, but again, excuse the dog fur. See can you see the points here? There's very fine, and oh my god, let me show you. I'll show you what this thing does because I love it, like insanely love it. So see this pencil? All right, I'm going to do just a couple of cranks with the sharpener. It actually grips the pencil very well, so it keeps it from moving, so you don't get, you know, what am I trying to say here? You don't wind up breaking the tip off because you've moved. Let me get just a little further here. Bear with me. It's hard to do at the angle I'm sitting at to do this. There we go. Oh, this is the one I dropped like 5 times. Hold on. I have a couple pencils. Once you've broken the core and the inside, I'm going to do it with this one instead. This is not the sharpener's fault. That pencil, I've knocked it down more times than I can count. But once you've broken the core on the inside, there's really no saving it. You just hope you get a longer piece next time. That has nothing to do with the sharpener, usually. Okay, there we go. You ready for this? All right, there it is now. Isn't that beautiful? It's crazy, right? Look how long that is. It went from being, here, comparison side by side. Isn't that great? When I want to get an even finer point, this is a foam sanding block, very cheap. It's only a couple of bucks. And I'll just turn it and very, very lightly rub at an angle so I get an extremely fine point. And I'll show you in just a second here. Just keep it in the same spot, because if I were to do it on top of another color, it would pick up the other color and I'd have to wipe it off. So it's just silly. Just keep it in the same color block area and you'll be good. This whole thing is a sanding block. Now you can see probably a little bit more so how fine of a tip that is. If you're having a problem with crumbling pencils, there are a couple of things that might be causing that. Penciled Imagination asks how mine crumble. One is that it could be a situation where the pencil brand may not have enough medium in it, because what they do is they mix it with a medium, what they call a binder, and then they squish it really tight, and that creates your lead, and then that's your core for your pencil, and then of course they put wood around the outside of it. The downside is a couple things. If it gets dropped, it breaks on the inside. You'll never see it until you start sharpening it, but it will happen. 100% guarantee that. And there's no saving at that point. You will come across sections of it that are usable, so don't throw it away, but you're not going to save it in the long run. It's going to happen. It happens to all of us. Don't worry. Sometimes it's the pencil sharpener itself. It's meaning that it's got too dull. Hold on 1 second. Meaning that it's got too dull, and don't do that. I did that because I've got tile under me. If you do that in your house, you're going to wind up with dust everywhere, so don't mimic me. But anyway, your sharpener might have too dull of a blade, so you might need to change it if it's one of those little ones. The kind that I just showed you has an internal mechanism like the ones that you had in school that have the 3 rotating tubes that have spiral cuts. And so it could be the pencil quality, it could be the sharpener needing a better blade, or it's been dropped. So sometimes it's just worthwhile to buy a more expensive pencil, because if you're using it right, then it'll last longer than you might think. If it's a black you're using or a white, I encourage you to get these that are the hard pastels, because it'll last so much longer. And yes, AFMAT. You can find it I saw it on Amazon recently for only $17. And I use Carbothello as well. FC Pit. I don't use those anymore, but I love the Carbothellos. They're the perfect combination of soft and hard. But yeah, if they were dropped in shipping, or if they've rolled off your table or anything like that, unfortunately, they're going to break. It's the downside of pastels or regular pencils. Sorry. But you learn to live with it. I actually, some of my pencils that I've had come in before, when I've dropped my favorite ones, I've had a tear or two shed, because I know it's probably the end of them, especially when I use them frequently. Kills me. But anyway, start getting some little marks in here. Oh, dog fur again. That's my Seraphina. It's probably tail fur. Long. Gotta love it. Alright, so this is part of the brow that's pretty bright because it's out of the dappled light. I'm not using white yet. I will come back in with white at a time for certain areas just to make it really stand out, but it really doesn't need white. Hi Gail, appreciate you joining us. And for those just joining us, for any of this that you want to see that you may have missed, don't worry, it'll be in my story for 24 hours, and I will be posting it on YouTube. So what you'll see is this eye from start to finish and this section of fur. So I've gotten through quite a bit of work here actually very quickly. Just getting some more markings in where I can see the direction of the fur, because I did mark over a couple of them. And the way that this brow goes, again, while I work, I'm keeping in mind the shape of it. Since the light's coming from this direction, you're going to get brighter on this side, medium tone through here, and darker through here. So I'm just trying to keep that in mind as I work. And this fur goes all kinds of crazy directions in this section of the head. So I'm having to constantly check my source image. Even though I'm getting some light marks in a couple spots over here, that's just because of you're always going to have those little hairs that just catch light better. So I try to take that in mind. Well, thank you, Gail. Gail says the eyes are amazing, beautiful. I really appreciate that. I have a lot of fun doing eyes. It's my favorite part of any drawing, is always the eye. I'm trying to get some of these other little hairs that have the kind of trail over here. Let me grab my white, because I want a really bright one in a couple spots. There's a couple of these little hairs that really stand out, so I'm just trying to mimic